Hello and welcome to our video lecture on privacy in the digital age. If ethics is a subfield of philosophy, then privacy is probably a subfield of ethics, because privacy deals with questions on when and how it is legal or illegal to access information about a person or his or her associations. After watching this video lecture, you should be able to explain what privacy is and why it is important, discuss two main questions related to privacy, and also discuss the dimensions of the so-called PAPA framework that helps you decide whether a particular person's or entity's privacy has been violated in an ethical way. So let's start with some basic definitions. Privacy can be defined as the selective control of access to the self. In other words, when we talk about our own privacy, we are talking about the type of controls that we want to be in place in order to prevent others for accessing the information about ourselves, about our associations, that we don't want others to know. So this is how privacy is defined from the perspective of an individual. Privacy has always been an important issue, an important topic of debates, but of course, privacy has gained special importance in the digital or information age. And this is why, with the advancements in information and communication technologies, capabilities to capture, store, and retrieve data and information have increased exponentially. Nowadays, all those websites like Facebook, Twitter, Google, they generate streams, digital streams that are growing exponentially, and those streams broadcast so much information about people, their preferences, their activities, their social connections, that sometimes it's scary how much data is being created, because some people believe that all this data that is growing exponentially, and now, by the way, it's measured in zettabytes, so all this data becomes like a ticking privacy bomb, because nobody knows when and how this data will be used and to what kind of consequences or conclusions people will arrive when they use this data. Now, one use or one consequence of generating so much digital data is that this data is used in business to improve decision making or to create strategies and tactics for serving customers better, for example, through personalization. For example, you probably have noticed, and sometimes people, they suspect, they have very serious suspicions that they're always being monitored, and sometimes they are. Like, for example, I've heard people complaining that I was talking to a relative of mine over the phone about purchasing, I don't know, a new cell phone. And then the next thing I know, I open my Google inbox and I see all those ads for iPhone 12, right? So they suspect that, businesses somehow leveraging all the information that they broadcast for personalization. Some people don't mind it, but some people feel that it's something very invasive, right? And then data mining. Nowadays, there are all kinds of tools and algorithms that can help organizations, businesses, law enforcement agencies to deduct all kinds of information about you by using simple logical and, right? Sometimes they can find out things about you that you're not personally aware of yourself, like, for example, some disease that you may have by combining what you're searching for in Google with your social media posts and things like that. They will say, oh, you might have this disease. Why don't you buy, or why don't you explore the possibility of using the following drug? So what other people can find out about you with the help of modern data mining tools is really amazing, and sometimes it's scary as well. So for all those reasons, privacy has gained more prominence and more importance in the digital age. Now, when people discuss privacy, either informally or as a part of a formal legal debate, their discussions are usually centered on the following two questions. What information about oneself or one's associations must a person reveal to others, under what conditions and with what safeguards? And number two, what things can people keep to themselves and not be forced to reveal to others? So it's all about deciding whether accessing someone's data is justified and under what conditions, or whether accessing one's data is not justified and therefore is unethical under certain conditions. So a lot of privacy debates, they center on the following two questions. And that's why it's important to keep those questions in mind when deciding whether one's privacy is violated or not. Now, when deciding whether one's privacy is unethically compromised, or maybe unethical is a redundant term here, because once you compromise somebody's privacy, once you get somebody's information without their knowledge, I think most people would feel that this is something negative. But nevertheless, when deciding whether one's privacy is compromised or not, one should consider the following dimensions. And by the way, those dimensions, they come from the so-called PAPA framework developed by Richard Mason back in 1986. Now, don't let that number scare you. That date is probably before your birth date. But I've seen all kinds of attempts to extend this framework, to revitalize it by adding additional details and things like that. But I feel like this framework is still relevant, and other researchers and thinkers have not done much beyond that framework. So another piece of background information. It's a framework, it's not a theory. A framework is something that classifies things. From a practical standpoint, a framework helps you to structure your thinking. It doesn't give you any answers. So a framework like this PAPA framework is not an algorithm that will help you to decide whether privacy has been compromised or not. It's more of a way to structure your thinking. So each of those dimensions has certain issues or questions that you may consider when analyzing a particular situation involving privacy, so that you can decide whether privacy has been violated or not. So Richard Mason, he said that privacy is just one of the dimensions of one of the ethical dimensions of the information and digital age. You cannot look at privacy in isolation from the other three dimensions, which is accuracy, how accurate the data or information that you're accessing is, who is responsible for those inaccuracies. Also, you cannot discuss privacy in isolation from the issue of property or ownership. Who owns this data? Whether this ownership gets transferred, under what conditions, with what compensation, and things like that. So all those issues or questions are related to property. And also access. You cannot look at privacy issues in isolation from policies or rules for accessing or not accessing a particular piece of information about individuals or entities. So that's the essence of the PAPA framework. Again, as you can probably guess, PAPA stands for privacy, accuracy, property, and access. So this is my summary of this framework, together with some background information. So we already discussed privacy, what it means, how it can be defined, and what are the main questions in relation to privacy. Now we're going to talk about those related dimensions: accuracy, property, and access, and some of the main questions related to those dimensions. Again, those questions, they don't really give you a recipe for addressing a particular situation. They give you things to think about when you're trying to determine whether privacy has been violated or not. So the first dimension is accuracy. Major issues can be captured with the following questions. Who is responsible for the authenticity, fidelity, and accuracy of information? Who is to be held accountable for errors in information, and how the injured party to be made whole? So for example, when you're thinking whether you're comfortable with somebody accessing your data, you need to think about truthfulness or accuracy of that data. So if there's a high chance that this data is not accurate, then if somebody accesses this data, let's say a law enforcement agency, and makes some kind of legal decision based on the data, then if this data is not accurate, then of course you're not comfortable with them using the data because of lack of accuracy in that information, right? So accuracy of information or data is something that should be considered when thinking about privacy issues. Now, another issue in relation to privacy is property. Who owns data information? What are the just and fair prices for its exchange? For example, if you own this data or information, then, as a legal owner of the data or information, why would you let somebody else to access it, right? I mean, you may say that, well, it's illegal for you to access my data because I own it, and your access is illegal, just like your access of my house would be illegal, something like that, right? And also sometimes it's a matter of a fair price. So for example, you may say that, well, for a certain price or for a certain benefit, I'm willing to give out this right for you to access it, to access my data, although I own it. But if you want to do it for free, if you want to make money on that without properly compensating me and putting me at risk, let's say due to accuracy, then I'm not comfortable with you accessing my data. So those are the major issues in relation to the property dimension. Now, there are some additional issues that make the property dimension sometimes problematic. For example, the ease or price of creation and distribution. You see what happens information can be costly to produce. For example, producing a book or a song can take years and expertise of a lot of people, time of a lot of people. So it's something that is very costly to produce. Yet, the distribution can be very easy. It doesn't cost much to copy a song or copy a book or copy somebody's website. So because the creation is expensive and distribution is cheap, it's virtually zero, a lot of people attempted not to create their own data, not to create their own digital products, but to steal or pirate somebody else's digital products. And also there's a question of fair distribution of economic value. Individuals may participate in the creation of information. For example, you go to Facebook and you write stories, you write your opinions, and then somebody, let's say, Facebook itself, compiling those opinions and letting marketers data mine your opinions for making personalized promotional offers to you. So there is a question of fair distribution of economic value. You're creating this information, you're spending time, you get zero benefit, you get zero income from that, while somebody else gets all the income, right? Or let's take Wikimedia Foundation, the company behind Wikipedia.org, which is a website that I'm sure you know about. You see a lot of people are contributing to this website, and the founder of this website, unfortunately I forgot his name, for a long time and up to this point, he treats Wikipedia as a non-profit initiative. So he doesn't sell access to Wikipedia, he's asking for donations, he doesn't sell anybody this whole website, although I'm sure a lot of organizations, especially organizations like Encyclopedia Britannica, I'm sure they want to buy it. So he doesn't do it, and for a long time I was a bit I guess positively astonished with his position, like that he never cashed out on all those billions that he could potentially get by commercializing his product or selling it. But then I thought about it and I was like thinking, well, that's the key to his success, right? If people knew that he's selling their articles, their corrections, their services, maybe they will not be willing to contribute, right? So if he starts selling Wikipedia, I'm not sure how long this project, this initiative will last, right? So maybe, I don't know, I mean, I don't want to say judgments about other people not knowing them, but maybe it's not related to his stance, but rather like a logical consideration that his company, his initiative will not survive if he tries to sell things, right? Because people will think that the distribution of economic value is not fair. They're creating articles while somebody's profiteering from it. So those things make property considerations more difficult for digital products and digital services. Finally, accessibility. Accessibility can be defined or outlined in terms of the following issues or questions. What information does a person or an organization have a right or privilege to obtain, under what conditions and with what safeguards? Usually those safeguards, those privileges, those rights are captured with policies, either organizational policies or formal legislature. And nowadays there has been a resurgence in the development of privacy legislature. European Union is very famous for their stance, while the United States seems to have a more lenient stance on privacy. I guess their stance on privacy is less restrictive and therefore more supportive of online data collection and online business activity. So a lot of those things are outlined in policies, in formal legislature or organizational rules and policies. So basically, accessibility comes down to this: did the person have the right to access my data based on the rules and legislature that we have? Okay, so that's another dimension for analyzing privacy issue. And that completes our video lecture on privacy in the digital age. Thank you for listening.